Okay, what if I told you that the best way to get to socialist goals, things like equality and worker empowerment, wasn't through a bigger government, but through a freer market? I know, it sounds like a complete paradox, right? But it's a real political idea with a super fascinating history, one that might just change how you see the entire left-right divide. So let's get into it.
I mean, think about our usual political options. It always feels like we're being forced to choose between two extremes, either a huge bureaucratic government running everything or a system that just seems to hand all the power over to massive corporations. Are those really the only two choices on the menu? And this really breaks down those two poles we're always hearing about. On one side, you've got state socialism, right? Central planning, state ownership, top-down control. And on the other, you have corporate capitalism, where you see this immense concentration of corporate power and wealth, often propped up by friendly deals with the state. It's really no wonder so many of us feel kind of stuck, looking for something else. But what if there's a third way that's been forgotten? One that actually aims for the goals of socialism, but wants to get there using the tools of a genuinely free market? Let's really unpack what that means.
So this is the core idea right here, using market means to achieve socialist ends. The whole theory goes like this. If you could just get rid of all the government-granted privileges that help big corporations dominate, the natural result of a truly free, decentralized market would be more equality and more power for workers. It sounds like a total contradiction, and honestly, that's exactly what makes it so interesting.
Now, this idea isn't some new thing someone just cooked up. Nope, it's got really deep roots way back in the 19th century with thinkers who argued that capitalism as we know it is not at all the same thing as a free market. And to get this, we've got to meet the philosopher who kind of kicked this whole conversation off.
It all starts with this incredibly famous, explosive statement from the French philosopher Pierre-Joseph Proudhon. Property is theft. I mean, that became a massive rallying cry for socialists for generations. But what if I told you that's only half the story?
Because the very same guy also wrote, property is liberty. So, which one is it? Was he just confused? Not at all. He was actually drawing a very sharp and, it turns out, a very important line in the sand.
Here's the difference he was talking about. When he said property is theft, he meant things like absentee ownership, a landlord who just collects rent without working the land, or a banker who collects interest. Basically, anyone profiting off someone else's labor. But when he said property is liberty, he was talking about personal possession, the tools you actually use, the house you actually live in. See, he wasn't against you having things, he was against using the idea of ownership to exploit other people.
So this idea travels across the ocean and finds a home in America with thinkers like Benjamin Tucker. Now, Tucker called himself a socialist, but his big solution wasn't to get rid of markets. It was to make them truly radically free. For him, the real enemy of the average working person wasn't competition.
It was monopoly. Specifically, he pointed to what he called the four great state-backed monopolies. First, the land monopoly, which made it really hard for regular folks to get access to productive land. Second, the money and banking monopoly, which controlled who could get credit and capital. Third, tariffs, which basically protected big, politically connected companies from any real competition. And finally, patents, which created artificial monopolies over ideas. Tucker's point was that these things rigged the whole game from the very start.
So the whole thing gets summed up perfectly in Tucker's own words. It is not competition, but monopoly that deprives labor of its product. His argument was pretty straightforward. If you could just tear down these four state-backed monopolies, the natural outcome of a truly free and competitive market would be that workers' wages would rise to match the full value they create. Poof, exploitation would just disappear.
So you might be asking yourself, okay, if this was such a powerful idea, where did it go? Why isn't market socialism a major political party today? Well, as it turns out, the idea got squeezed out of existence from all sides.
A few really big things happened. First, in the world of economics, this thing called the marginalist revolution came along and changed how economists thought about value, which made these older labor-based theories seem kind of outdated. Then you had the rise of state socialism with the Soviet Union, which created this huge, powerful example that basically said socialism equals total state control. And of course, the Cold War locked that in. It created this binary. You were either with American-style capitalism or you were with Soviet communism. There was just no oxygen for anything in between. And then finally, in the 80s, the term free market got completely tied up with the pro-corporate policies of neoliberalism.
So the result of all that history is that the very meaning of the words changed. Socialism came to mean one thing and one thing only,
the state, and free market became a code word for defending the corporate status quo. And this whole other idea of market socialism, it was left completely stranded, an idea without a political home.
But, and this is where it gets really cool, in our modern world, this super-connected, decentralized, internet-driven world, this old, forgotten idea is actually starting to make a comeback. It's finding a new life here in the 21st century.
And you can see these echoes of it everywhere if you start looking. I mean, think about worker-owned co-ops, or the entire world of open-source software built on collaboration. Think about decentralized crypto projects trying to challenge that old banking monopoly, or even the huge debate around the gig economy, where people are asking, hey, what if the drivers and the creators actually own the platforms themselves? These are all modern takes on that same old dream of a decentralized, worker-empowered economy.
And this really gets to the heart of what the vision is all about. It's not just some simple anti-government idea that ends up making massive corporations even more powerful. The goal is not Walmart minus the state. It's something way more radical and interesting. A vision of a whole network of free communities and free people all cooperating voluntarily.
So we're left with this really challenging final thought. This whole forgotten history asks us to question everything we assume about markets and about socialism. What if the freest possible market isn't the one we have today? What if a truly, radically free market is one where the workers, not the capitalists, are the ones in charge? It's a powerful question and definitely one worth thinking about. Thanks for joining me for this one.